Welcome back, seekers of stories, to Myth, Legends and Rainfall, where the echoes of ancient tales meet the rhythm of the rain. I'm glad you're here. Let's step once more into the realm of legends and wonder. Today we're going to immerse ourselves in one of Ireland's oldest and most haunting myths, a story that has shaped the Irish soul for over 1,000 years. This is the legend of the Children of Lir, a tale so profound that it stands as one of the three great sorrows of Irish storytelling, alongside stories that have echoed through Celtic culture since before the written word. Picture this. You're standing by a misty Irish lake at dawn, and across the water you hear the most hauntingly beautiful song you've ever experienced. It's not quite human, yet it speaks to something deep in your soul. The locals tell you it's just the wind through the reeds, but something ancient in their eyes suggests they know better. This is the power of the Children of Lir, a legend that predates Swan Lake by centuries and cuts far deeper than any ballet ever could. This isn't just entertainment, it's a foundational myth that explains how the Irish understand suffering, endurance, and the terrible price of jealousy. Our story begins in mystical Ireland, during the age of the Tuatha De Danann, literally the people of the goddess Danu. These weren't distant, stern gods, but divine beings who lived and loved with human passion while wielding reality-shaping power. They brought four great treasures to Ireland: the Stone of Destiny that would cry out under the rightful king, the Spear of Lugh that never missed, the Sword of Nuada from which none could escape, and the Cauldron of the Dagda that could feed any company. In this world, magic was as natural as breathing. Druids commanded storms, boundaries between human and animal were fluid, and a woman's jealousy could literally reshape destiny. Among the Tuatha De Danann ruled King Lir, Lord of the Sea. His name itself means sea, and he controlled not just water but the boundary between worlds, the source of all life. When High King Bod Bedurg offered his daughter Abu's hand in marriage to create political peace, it became something far greater, a love story that calmed the very seas. Abuk, whose name means radiance, possessed the rare gift of seeing the best in everyone. Their palace became a beacon of joy, where other nobles travelled simply to experience the peace that radiated from their home. Their four children were each born under auspicious signs: Fionnuala during the summer solstice, her cries harmonizing with morning larks; Ardor during a winter storm illuminated by aurora-like lights; and the twins Fiachra and Con during the spring equinox, their synchronized cries making ancient oaks sway in rhythm. But perfect happiness in myth is always temporary. Aboic died shortly after the twins' birth, and Lyra's grief was so profound it affected his very waters. Tides became erratic, storms appeared without warning, and fishermen reported the sea itself seemed to be weeping. Into this shattered household came Aoife, Aoife's younger sister. It seemed perfect. Who better to help raise Aoife's children than her own sister? Bod Beg proposed the marriage with genuine concern for his son-in-law's well-being. But Aoife had always lived in her sister's shadow. Even as children, Aoife had been the one everyone noticed first, whose laughter was more musical, whose kindness was more genuine. Aoife had learned to hide her resentment behind sisterly affection, but the seeds of jealousy had been planted early. For a brief time, the marriage worked, but Aoife soon realized a terrible truth. Even in death, Aoife dominated her husband's heart. Lyra's love for his children wasn't just parental, it was his living connection to his lost wife. In Fionnuala's wisdom he saw Aoife, in Aoide's courage he glimpsed her strength, in the twins he found her joy. What began as disappointment curdled into resentment, then festered into consuming hatred. Aoife began seeing malice in innocent actions. She withdrew, claiming mysterious illnesses while her mind turned toward darker thoughts. She spent nearly a year researching ancient curses, studying transformation magic, slowly formulating a plan that would solve her problem once and for all. The morning that would destroy everything began like any other summer day. Aoife suggested an outing to Lough Derravera, the Lake of the Oaks. Wouldn't the children enjoy swimming? Lar, grateful to see his wife taking interest again, readily agreed. The lake was one of Ireland's most beautiful spots, surrounded by ancient oaks whose roots reached deep into earth, and branches seemed to touch the sky. It was a place where magic felt particularly strong. The children were delighted. Fionnuala looked forward to swimming in clear, cool water. Ardor made sure the younger twins were prepared. Fiachra and Con chatted excitedly about what fish they might see. As they travelled, Aoife's resolve wavered several times. Watching their innocent excitement nearly broke through her wall of hatred. But then Fionnuala would laugh with pure joy. and Aoife would hear Aoife's echo. The terrible isolation of being forever outside their charmed circle would reassert itself. When they reached the lake, the children immediately ran toward the water, splashing and playing with careless joy. These were their last moments as human children. Standing on shore, Aoife felt the weight of the druidic wand in her hand, carved from sacred hawthorn, inlaid with otherworldly silver, thrumming with power. For one last moment she hesitated. They looked so beautiful, so perfectly innocent. But jealousy had poisoned her too thoroughly. With a voice shaking with hatred and terrible regret, she raised the wand and spoke ancient words that would echo through Irish legend for centuries. The magic struck like lightning. The children felt it first as tingling, then as fundamental alteration in their very beings. Bodies stretched and changed, bones reshaping, skin becoming feathers, arms becoming wings. But their minds remained human, their memories intact, their capacity for suffering undiminished. 4 magnificent white swans floated where children had been playing. It was Fionnula's voice, emerging from a swan's throat in perfect human speech, that made the horror complete. "What have you done to us?" Aoife's response revealed the full extent of her malice. This wasn't simple transformation. She had crafted a curse with jeweler's precision, every facet designed to maximize suffering while appearing almost generous. They would remain swans for 900 years. Not random, but calculated to ensure they outlived everything they had ever known. They would retain human voices and minds. But this wasn't mercy. It was the cruelest part. They would remain fully human in thoughts and emotions while trapped in bodies that could never again know human comfort. The curse divided into 3 phases. 300 years on Lough Derravara, close to home but forever separated. 300 years on the brutal Sea of Moyle, and 300 years on remote Ines Glora. Only the ringing of a Christian bell could break it. And Christianity was not just unknown in Ireland, it was unimaginable. When news reached Lir, his grief and rage shook the foundations of the other world. He transformed Aoife into a demon of the air, condemned to wander winds for eternity. But the children were lost forever. The first 3 centuries were characterized by the terrible weight of being close to everything they'd lost. Every day they could see shores where they'd once played as humans. Every night they slept on waters reflecting stars they'd once watched from bedroom windows. Lir spent every possible moment by the lake. Their songs were indescribably beautiful, more beautiful than any music that had ever existed. The magic had taken their forms but left voices that could convey emotion more purely than any human throat. People came from across Ireland to hear them sing. Fionnuala continued caring for her brothers with the same devotion she'd shown as a human child. She would gather them under her wings during storms, share food when hunting was poor, lead them in songs that kept spirits up during darkest nights. Her essential nature remained unchanged. If anything, trials seemed to purify her capacity for love. Aoife remained the protector, always alert, always ready to shield siblings from harm. He learned to navigate by stars, rid weathering clouds, find safest resting places. The twins maintained their close bond, often swimming in perfect synchronization, their movements creating patterns that seemed to tell wordless stories. As years passed, they watched their father age and die. This was perhaps the cruelest aspect. They remained young and strong, while everyone they'd ever loved grew old and passed away. Lir's death left them truly orphaned. During these centuries, the world around them was changing. The Tuatha De Danann realm was giving way to something more mundane. Great palaces became empty ruins, their inhabitants departing for distant lands or fading into legend. New peoples arrived, the Milesians, ancestors of mortal Irish, and others with different gods, different magic, different ways of understanding the world. The Sea of Moyle, the narrow strait between Ireland and Scotland, was everything Lough Derravara was not. Where the lake had been peaceful, the sea was violent. Where the lake offered sheltering shores, the sea provided only rocky outcroppings and endless grey waters. This phase was designed to test physical endurance and family bonds. Winter was worst. Northern waters would partially freeze, ice forming on feathers, weighing them down, sometimes literally freezing them to rocks until thaws freed them. The cold penetrated not just bodies but souls. Storms were relentless and vicious. Waves tall as mountains would crash over them, separating siblings for hours or days. In worse tempests, they'd lose sight of each other entirely, each struggling alone against wind and water, not knowing if they'd ever reunite. Fear of permanent separation was almost worse than physical suffering. But if the Sea of Moyle was designed to break them, it instead proved their bond unbreakable. Finuala's protective instincts became even stronger. She'd spread wings wide to shelter brothers during storms, her body becoming their anchor against battering waves. Her voice would rise above howling wind, singing songs that reminded them of warmth, safety, love. Aoife became expert at reading the sea's moods, knowing when to seek rocky shelter and when to stay in open water, where waves, though larger, were less likely to dash them against stone. Fahakra and Kon discovered their synchronized movements could be life-saving. Swimming in perfect unison, they could cut through waves that would overwhelm a single swan. Their songs during this period were different. Where lake songs had been beautiful laments, sea songs became defiant anthems of survival. They sang to encourage each other during storms, to call through fog when separated, to celebrate the simple fact they were still together. The 300 years seemed to last much longer than their lake time. Each day was struggle for survival, each night a test of will to continue. But they endured, proving their love stronger than any curse. When their second sentence was complete, the curse drew them to Inisglora, a small island off County Mayo's coast. After brutal Sea of Moyle trials, the island seemed almost paradise-like, calmer waters, actual land for rest, milder climate. But Aoife's curse was more sophisticated than simple physical torture. If the Sea of Moyle targeted their bodies, Inisglora targeted their spirits. The island was beautiful, but utterly empty, peaceful, but completely cut off from any companionship or purpose. This was true isolation, not violent isolation of battling storms, but quiet, crushing isolation of being forgotten by the world. The island they'd known was completely gone, replaced by land and people with no memory of the Tuatha De Danann, no understanding of their story. Early in their island time, the children made a heartbreaking pilgrimage to their childhood home at the Hill of the White Field. What they found was devastating. Ruins so old and overgrown, they were barely recognizable. The great hall where they'd played was moss-covered stones. Their mother's gardens were wilderness. Even the lake where they'd first been cursed was smaller and wilder. This visit broke something that all physical suffering couldn't touch. It was final proof that everything they'd known was gone forever. They weren't just transformed, they were displaced in time, relics of a vanished world. Back on Inisglora, centuries stretched ahead like an endless path through darkness. They'd survived physical trials, but now faced something potentially more destructive. Slow erosion of hope that comes with outliving your entire world. Their island songs were different again. Meditations on memory and loss. They sang to keep memories alive, to ensure someone still remembered the world of the Tuatha De Danann, the love of King Lir, the beauty of Queen Aoife. Finuala became keeper of memory, telling and retelling stories of childhood, parents, their people's great days. The weight of time began telling in subtle ways. They hadn't aged physically, but accumulated psychological weight of centuries. They'd seen empires rise and fall, watched forests grow and be cleared, observed slow changes marking deep time's passage. By their second century on Inisglora, hope had faded to the faintest ember. The promise of freedom with a Christian bell seemed like cruel joke. They had no understanding of what Christianity was, no reason to believe it would ever reach Ireland. They began wondering if the curse's supposed solution was actually impossible, that they were doomed to remain swans forever. While swan children endured their final centuries, momentous changes were occurring in Ireland. Christianity had begun taking root. Saints like Patrick, Bridget, and Columba were spreading the gospel, building churches, establishing monasteries. This wasn't just religious transformation. It was complete cultural reimagining. Old Druidic traditions gave way to Christian practices, oral traditions of the Tuatha De Danann, replaced by written scriptures, magical worldview supplanted by new understanding of divine power. Some early Christian monks were drawn to isolated places for prayer and contemplation. Rocky islands, remote lakes, wild headlands became sites for hermitages and small monasteries. Among these monks was Brother Carmhog, whose name means gentle. Unlike militant missionaries, Carmhog was drawn to contemplative Christianity. He'd heard legends of swan children, stories that had somehow survived centuries, taking on mythical quality among Irish people. Most dismissed these as fairy tales, but Carmhog felt deep conviction there was truth in the legend, and more importantly, that these beings, if they existed, were souls needing salvation. Driven by curiosity, compassion, and divine calling, he made the difficult journey to Inisglora. On a misty dawn morning, near the end of the Swan Children's 9th century of exile, Caomhog rang his bell for first time on Inisglora. The sound was small and clear, cutting through morning air with almost supernatural purity. Nothing like great bells that would later grace Ireland's cathedrals, just a simple bronze bell, hand-forged by monks. But to swan children, that sound was the most beautiful thing they'd ever heard, not because of its musical quality, but because of what it represented. Fulfillment of a promise made 900 years earlier, the key to a prison that had held them longer than most civilizations endure. Aoife was first to understand. Her voice, still carrying pure tones that had entranced listeners for centuries, cried out, "My brothers, do you hear that? The bell! The bell that will free us!" The 4 swans rose as one and flew toward the sound. Their flight was different from any in 9 centuries. Not laboured movement seeking shelter, not purposeful navigation toward food, but ecstatic rush of prisoners racing toward freedom. When Brother Callumhog saw 4 magnificent swans land before his shelter and begin speaking in perfect Irish, he experienced what could only be described as miracle. Here was proof old stories were true, that the world contained wonders beyond ordinary understanding. The swan's story poured out in a rush of words building for centuries. Fiona Wala told their tale with born storyteller's skill, conveying not just facts but emotional weight of 900 years of suffering, endurance and unbroken love. Callumhog listened with scholar's attention and saint's compassion. He recognized in their story a profound spiritual allegory, beings who'd endured unimaginable trials without losing capacity for love, who'd maintained hope facing seemingly endless despair, who'd remained faithful when everything else was stripped away. Understanding the miraculous nature of events, Callumhog bound them with silver chains, not as prisoners, but as protection. The chains established the swans as being under church protection, invoking one of the strongest forms of sanctuary available. Word of miraculous singing swans reached Lurgnan, king of Connacht, whose heart was ruled by ambition rather than wisdom. When his wife Queen Deoch heard descriptions of the swans' beauty and magical voices, she became obsessed with possessing them. To the royal couple, swans were exotic treasures to be owned, proof of power and status. They couldn't comprehend these were souls who'd earned freedom through centuries of suffering. When Callumhog refused to surrender them, Lurgnan arrived with armed men. The moment soldiers laid hands on silver chains, something fundamental shifted in the curse's magical fabric. The combination of violent greed, breaking sacred protection, the Christian bell's presence, and the prophesied time's completion created perfect storm of magical dissolution. But the curse's breaking wasn't joyful transformation. Fairy tales might suggest swan children had been sustained by the same magic that trapped them. When it shattered, time claimed its due all at once. 4 beautiful swans dissolved like morning mist, and in their place stood 4 ancient humans, not the children cursed 9 centuries earlier, but what those children would have become living through all those years as mortals. Fiona Wala was now elderly, her hair white as swan feathers, face lined with age's wisdom. Her brothers were equally aged, bearing nearly a millennium's weight. Yet essential qualities that sustained them through trials remained visible. Fiona eyes still held protective love. Otupate's bearing showed courage that faced 9 centuries of hardship. The twins still moved with synchronized grace. Seeing 4 ancient humans before him, Brother Callumhog understood what needed to be done. These souls had endured their earthly purgatory, paid in full for whatever cosmic debt their transformation represented. Working with reverent care, he baptized each sibling, pouring holy water over their heads, speaking ancient words welcoming them into Christian faith. The baptism was more than religious ceremony. It was final healing of wounds that had festered for centuries. As holy water touched their foreheads, years of pain seemed to lift from their faces. For the first time since childhood, they looked truly peaceful. With baptism complete, the 4 siblings felt approach of death they'd been denied for 9 centuries. This wasn't violent end, but gentle passing that comes to those who've completed their earthly journey. They arranged themselves exactly as Fiona requested in the same protective formation used as swans during worst storms. Con to her right, Fiacre to her left, Aoife before her, cradled in her arms. Even facing death, Fiona's first instinct was gathering beloved brothers close. Their last words weren't of regret despite centuries of suffering. Instead, they spoke of love for each other, gratitude for Callumhog's kindness, and surprisingly forgiveness for Aoife. They'd learnt that hatred only multiplies suffering, while love transforms even terrible circumstances into something meaningful. As they died still holding each other, their faces showed not exhaustion of extreme age, but serenity of souls, finally finding their way home. Brother Callumhog wept not from sadness, but from recognition of the sacred mystery he'd witnessed. The Children of Lir legend marks Ireland's transition from pagan to Christian culture. The curse was cast with Druid's wand, broken by Christian Bell. Early Christians saw it as triumph of new faith over old world. Later generations facing Viking invasions, Norman conquest, English colonization saw it as metaphor for Ireland itself, their 9th-century ordeal paralleling the nation's struggle, their endurance modelling Irish resilience, their eventual liberation offering hope. Throughout their exile, the Swan children's songs were their greatest gift to the world and most effective means of maintaining humanity. This made them patron saints of sorts for Irish musicians. Traditional Sean Nos singing, with its complex ornamentation and emotional directness, is sometimes said to echo their voices. The 3 locations, Lough Derravara, Sea of Moyle, and Innisglora, remain places of pilgrimage. Visitors often report profound peace mixed with melancholy, as if landscape retains memory of centuries of beautiful, sorrowful song. The story endures, because it addresses universal experiences while remaining authentically Irish. Everyone has known jealousy like Aoife's, faced seemingly impossible trials, relied on family bonds during difficult times. The legend's power lies in refusing easy answers. The Swan children's suffering was real and prolonged, their loss permanent, their victory coming only at life's very end. This honest acknowledgement of life's capacity for unfairness, combined with demonstration of human capacity to find meaning in worst circumstances, gives the legend emotional authenticity that purely optimistic tales lack. In our world, where families scatter across continents and traditional communities face disruption, the Children of Lir's emphasis on sibling loyalty has special relevance. Their bond across 9 centuries offers a model for keeping family connections strong across modern life's challenges. The story speaks to anyone who's experienced trauma or forced change. The Swan children's journey from despair through endurance to eventual peace mirrors psychological processes trauma survivors must navigate. Their example suggests while trauma's effects may be permanent, healing and meaning remain possible. Most importantly, the legend reminds us that some beauty can only be created through suffering, some wisdom only gained through endurance. The Swan children's songs were more beautiful than any previous music precisely because they were born from profound loss and sustained by deep love. Their story suggests meaningful human experiences often come not from avoiding suffering, but from facing it with courage, love, and hope. Their 9 centuries of exile were terrible, but also the crucible transforming ordinary siblings into beings capable of unprecedented love and endurance. Today, when we hear traditional Irish music carrying themes of exile and longing, when we see families supporting each other through impossible circumstances, when we witness human capacity to find hope in darkness, we hear echoes of the Children of Lir's eternal song. Their voices continue singing through every act of love transcending suffering, every bond surviving separation, every hope enduring despite impossible odds. The legend promises that no matter how long the night, how harsh the storm, how isolated we feel, the bell of salvation will eventually ring. When it does, we'll discover all our suffering has been transformed into something meaningful, all our love preserved, and the songs we sang to sustain ourselves were more beautiful than we ever knew. That's it for today's tale. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell so you'll catch the next story when the rain returns. See you soon.